Okay, I am confident that I've got both of these machines set up for the tablet that you're going to be happy with, but this machine in particular is the one that we got 2 sets of tooling for so that you can run your small 1 gram tablet, and so you will have to change the dies and the punches and the thickness and the weight and all of that stuff when you change that over, so you're going to need to watch this video for that. And then also, just as time goes on, you might have a different formulation. Humidity affects your formulation, so different things can affect the weight of the tablet, because of course the machine is measuring based on volume, but you are going to be measuring based on weight, and so that causes some issues, both like psychologically and over time you think, well, how could I leave the machine and it's just fine, and the next day it's different? Well, the humidity is different, and so your formulation is denser. So when you go to make an adjustment, the one thing that I would like to make clear, that I think is a lot clearer if I describe it than the owner's manual, is that all 3 of the adjustments that you can make have an effect on the other adjustments. So if I've got a tablet that is too light, I'm happy with the thickness, and I'm happy with the hardness, but I need it to be a little bit heavier. All right. So I come over here to the fill cam, and I increase the weight. All right. As soon as I increase the weight, then the volume of the die cavity as it leaves the feed frame is now greater. And so as it travels over here to get compressed, since there's more material in there, the distance between the 2 pressure rolls is set the same. And if you've got your tonnage set correctly, all right, then when you added that extra powder, the tablet's going to come out thicker, because the tonnage is this is going to give way. All right. So now you've got a tablet and you've got it the right weight, but it's too thick. And so you say, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make it thinner. So you come over here and you make this adjustment, and it doesn't do much, because the next thing that happens is that that spring just keeps giving way. All right. So if you're going to make the tablet thinner, the first thing you need to do is make sure that this is cranked down a little bit. In fact, the 3 of these things playing together is so frustrating that what I typically do myself is I crank this down until it's basically useless. Right? Just put it on the heaviest tonnage you got. You probably don't need, that's an over exaggeration, but basically you need to adjust it tighter than it should be. All right. So now you've taken it out of the equation, because it's really meant to be a safety device. It keeps your machine from wearing out. If you just let it float ever so gently, you're not pounding so hard on your tooling, you're not wearing out your dies, flattening your tips, and also if anything goes wrong, then this will give way rather than the machine crashing. All right, so it's a bit of a gamble, but basically I crank this down first. That way I can guarantee that when I make this adjustment for thickness, it is exactly where it's going to be. All right. Then at the end, after you've got your weight and your thickness correct, then you can come back here and loosen this until you just start to see this starting to move. And I mean ever so slightly. It doesn't need to be sitting there pounding away. If it's slapping and bouncing around, then this needs to be tightened down. All right. And that's the same on both machines. They're both identical. You got a tonnage spring here, and you've got that same adjuster right here. You may wonder why this one's got a wire attached to it. This used to have a strain gauge on it. That cable would have been attached to a computer, and then every time that the compression stroke hit, this essentially gets the molecules get denser, which changes the resistance, and so this would, in a very accurate fashion, measure the hardness, which, if you're making pharmaceutical pills, is super critical. So you don't need that strain gauge. I wouldn't cut it. It adds to the value of the machine, but it also isn't necessary for what you're doing. But yeah, if you go to make any one of those adjustments, you may see this slapping around and bouncing around, and you go, oh well, I'll just tighten that down. Well, now this doesn't have as much give in it, and so your tablet just got thinner. But the way you're supposed to think of it is this is tablet thickness, this is tablet hardness, and this is tablet weight. Back here on the Manistys. There is another adjustment on the Manistee here that the Stokes doesn't have. And as long as we're going over adjustments, this is the height of ejection. So you can see I've got the punch set to come up past the die a little bit, which is nice because there's no chance of you breaking that tablet as it comes popping out of there. And there's always a little bit of a gap underneath the takeoff plate anyway, so that's where I have it set. But you can make it perfectly flush. That's what Stokes aims to do, is perfectly flush. If you wanted that to be a little bit higher, then you put a shim underneath the ejection cam. There's no rule against that if you start having problems, but it was ejecting really nice the other day, so you shouldn't have any issues there. But yeah, just remember all three of those things work together. You know, you can cheat and start by measuring out your weight, and if you come over here and you've got a known, you know, a cup of powder and your feed frame is removed and you pour it in there, you can adjust the weight while you're watching the punch move up and down. If you're starting from scratch, like when you guys start to switch to the 1 gram tablet, you can do that and then find out where you need to be to get you in the ballpark, so that when you start up, you know what you're doing. Because it does get pretty maddening if you're trying to use, you know, if you don't know where you're at starting from the start, and you've got your hopper on here, which I'm going to do a whole separate video on powder flow, but if you've got your hopper on here and you fill it up with powder and you start to make the adjustments as the machine is running, you can run through a lot of powder and not even know what you're doing, because everything is affecting everything else. So like when I tooled these up, I started by measuring out the amount of weight I wanted, putting that where it roughly needed to be, and then coming over here and cranking this down until I got a thickness that I was happy with. And then I hit start, and then when everything's moving dynamically, it affects everything. And so you'll make sure that when you are running it, you make your adjustment, you wait at least for those 8 tools to hit the feed frame, so then I don't take a sample until the turret's spun a couple of times. Then I stop it, take a sample, measure that, and then you can fine tune it while it's running, which you'll have to do. But like I say, just try to focus on one thing at a time. Typically the weight first, then the thickness, and then just the thickness and the hardness are essentially the same thing. You can only get hardness from making a thinner tablet. So this is more of a safety device, and so that would be the last thing that I would play with, is to try to get that just loose enough where it's you're using the spring and you're preventing any damage, but not so tight that it's basically useless. So hopefully that helps, and like I said in the email, you can feel free to call me. I'll walk you through it. All right, see ya.